You've hired someone to do a job for you, and you're not sure whether or not you should treat them as an employee for purposes of paying wages and overtime. How do you make that determination? There are 3 different agencies that are concerned with how a person is categorized as an employee or an independent contractor. They are the IRS, the United States Department of Labor, and the Indiana Department of Workforce Development. Each of those agencies has a different test that it applies in determining whether a person is an employee. Today I'll be talking about the United States Department of Labor. The Department of Labor has a 6-factor analysis that it calls the Economic Realities Test. Its focus is on looking at whether or not an individual is financially independent from the business for which he or she is providing services. Let's examine each of those 6 factors. The first factor is the degree of control exercised by the company over the manner of work to be performed. In this factor, the Department of Labor examines whether the company tells the worker when, where, and how to do their job. The greater amount of supervision, oversight, and scheduling provided by the company for the individual, the more likely that person is an employee. On the other hand, if that person has the ability to set their own hours and to work off premises, that lends itself to a finding that the person may be an independent contractor. The second factor is the extent of the investments of the worker and the business. In this factor, the Department of Labor examines whether the worker has made investments in their own equipment and tools such that they are financially independent from the business for which they're providing services. If the worker has their own risk of loss, or if they share the risk of loss with the business, it's more likely that person is an independent contractor. The third factor is the degree to which the worker's opportunity for profit and loss is determined by the business rather than by the worker's managerial skills. In this factor, the Department of Labor examines whether or not the business unilaterally gets to determine the profit margins for that worker. On the other hand, if the worker is able to make decisions that affect his or her own profit margins, that points to a finding that he or she is an independent contractor. The fourth factor is the skill and initiative required to do the job. In this factor, the Department of Labor examines whether there is specialized training, testing, or certification required to provide the services. Work that requires little to no training is more likely to lend itself to a finding that the person is an employee. The fifth factor is the degree of permanence of the working relationship. Engagements that extend over longer periods of time are more indicative of an employment relationship than those that are only temporary. The sixth factor is whether the service rendered is an integral part of the business. Now this factor makes sense because if the services provided by the individual are a part of a key aspect of the business, it's more likely that person is an employee. Now on the other hand, if the person's providing services that are different than what the company provides, that person is more likely to be an independent contractor. Now just like the IRS test, there's no magic formula in weighing these 6 separate factors. The key is to look at the whole relationship to determine whether or not the person has the sort of financial independence that we expect from independent contractors. The greater amount of financial independence, the more likely that person is an independent contractor. The less financial independence, the more likely that person is an employee. Now it's very important that a business make this determination correctly, because if the person is an employee, they need to make sure to pay them the correct amount of wages and overtime under the Federal Labor Standards Act. If they fail to do so, they can face litigation and significant liability. That's the Department of Labor test. I'm Phil Zimmerly. Thanks for watching.